Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about 7 red flags that every executive director should know. These are the 7 red flags that need to be on your radar and that you need to be watching out for. And so if you're interested, then you want to stay tuned. The first red flag is inconsistent reporting. So the first thing is we're actually literally talking about timing. You know, are you getting your reports monthly, or is it sometimes monthly, sometimes quarterly? You know, is there a consistent cadence? If not, that's the first thing that you need to be thinking about, because that helps you to do your job better, because you should be actually reviewing those reports on a consistent basis. And if you're not, or if you're unable to, it probably stems from one or a few things. Number one is that there probably isn't a consistent process happening in the accounting department, right? In the fiscal area. And so you probably need to drill down and find out what's going on there. Are you short-staffed? Do you have a bookkeeper or an accounting team that's supporting you? You know, what's happening over there that's causing you to not get that consistent reporting. Accurate and timely reporting affects other things, right? So if you have to report out to grants, if you have to invoice to funders, right? If there are certain decisions that need to be made, but you need to be able to see the numbers to do those, you can't do it if your reports are inconsistent. I'm talking about timeliness, but also there's the case of if the actual reporting is then inconsistent, meaning that there are consistently errors. If you get it one month and it looks a certain way, but then the next month you see that things have changed, like what's going on. And that's why also you need to be getting the reports consistently, because you'd only know that the numbers are inconsistent if you are looking at reports on a consistent basis. And so I am sorry for the use of consistent and inconsistent so often in this one, but again, I'm trying to drop the point home. That is red flag number 1. So let's talk red flag number 2. That's going to be unreconciled bank accounts. That is an absolute no-no, okay? That is an absolute no-no. Reconciling your bank accounts on a monthly basis is for a few things, not just to say that you've done it and to check it off, but you want to, make sure that whatever you have in your accounting system matches what's in the bank, right? So at the very simplest levels, right, you want to make sure that your books match your bank statement. The reason rather why you're reconciling is because you want to make sure that you're looking out for errors. You want to make sure that you're looking out for duplicate transactions. And you also want to make sure that you're keeping an eye on fraudulent activity. You cannot do that if you're not reconciling monthly, because that means that you don't know what's going on. You can't just sit and have unreconciled accounts just rolling over. There are times, when we work with nonprofits that we come in, one of the first things we do is we check what is the current state of the books. Part of that is, have you been reconciling consistently? Sometimes we go and the books haven't been reconciled for months on months, and that is unacceptable. And so at the very base level, right, you should be reconciling your books on a monthly basis. Okay, let's go into red flag number 3. This is over-reliance on any one funder. Right? So if a substantial portion of your funding comes from a single source, whether that's a specific donor, whether that's a specific grant, whether that's a specific fundraising event, that is a risk. And that is a significant risk, because if at any point that goes away, the organization is in trouble, period. The organization is in trouble, right? It could literally, critically destabilize the organization. And I've actually been there with an organization before, and it held up payroll, and it also had the board wondering whether or not the organization should even continue, because as you probably know, it takes time to secure funding. When you're not even thinking about it, or when you're not prepared for it, and that one, source of revenue goes, you're literally on shaky ground, and you have no clue on when that next set of funding is even going to come in. And so you do not want to do that to your organization. It's key to start thinking about how you can diversify your revenue streams, whether that's money from multiple different, funders, multiple different grants, whether that's having grant income as one category, but then also thinking about how your organization can start to introduce earned revenue, right? So something that your organization has more control over, whether it's providing certain services for a fee, right? You need to be thinking about that. So number 4 red flag is going to be inadequate reserves. And this kind of hinges on number 3 a little bit, because if you are solely relying on one source of funding, I can bet that you probably don't have reserves or you don't have much in reserves. Inadequate reserves is also something else that could destabilize the organization, because let's take red flag number 3. If you have reserves, losing a source of funding, for the most part, if you have adequate reserves, you could probably carry the organization for a certain period of time. Now, I know most organizations look to have about 3 to 6 months in reserves. And so the idea would be that, let's say you lost that funder, you'd have about 3 to 6 months that you could carry the organization while you figure things out. However, if you have inadequate reserves, now we're talking about layoffs. Now we're talking about vendors not being paid. We're possibly talking about bills not being paid, because the money has to come from somewhere, right? And if you have no reserves, that usually means that someone or something is not getting paid. And so I implore you to think about, when you're doing your plans for the year, when you're budgeting, you need to be thinking about how it is that you can set aside money for rough times, because rough times inevitably comes, and that it could be economic conditions, it could be the loss of certain sources of funding, right? And so at any point it could happen, right? And a lot of times we can't plan for when it's going to happen, but what we can say is that whenever it happens, here's what we set aside, and here's what our contingency plan is. This is what we're going to kick into gear should one of these things happen. So the next red flag, number 5, is high turnover in key roles or key positions, right? So we're talking about roles like someone in your finance team, because that is key. Program directors, your operations director, these people who specifically, have very key or important roles in managing or running the organization. A lot of times this is a sign of deeper issues, burnout, toxic work environment, lack of funding, right? The thing is, when key people are constantly or consistently leaving the organization, your institutional knowledge is going with it, right? And so that's the first issue, right? And then it's also expensive to rebuild. The amount of time it takes to, put out a job description, get the job out there in the public, then have people apply, then sort through applications, then interview. It is a process, right? And it can be time consuming. However, life goes on, right? So while you're still trying to hire a CFO or controller, the books still have to be closed, the audit still has to be done, the 990 still has to be filed. It can be very detrimental to the organization. We know that you can't control if or when someone leaves, but creating a safe and collaborative environment is on the organization, right? Creating a contingency plan for when someone leaves is on the organization. Having proper systems and processes in place should someone leave, take a leave of absence, whatever the case is on the organization. So you want to make sure that you're doing everything on your end to plan for if or when these things happen, so that you are not left holding the bag and trying to figure out what you're going to do. And so if and when people leave, it's also good to perform exit interviews so you can understand what happened. I'm saying recently, but it was a couple of months ago, I recently took on an organization, and they were coming to us because their finance director was leaving, and the finance director was gracious enough to stay on for 2 more months past giving her resignation, and she was helping to onboard us. And when I had a private conversation with just her and not the organization, some of the things that she shared let me know that had things in the organization been working better or working well, she would not be leaving. And so I think it's important to listen to your people when they're highlighting issues, concerns, issues with processes, systems being broken. You have to listen to them, because if they're in it on a day-to-day and something is not working and it's causing them pain in doing their job, you want to listen, because typically though, that is signaling that there are gaps in areas that as an organization you need to address. Number 6 is failing to meet grant reporting deadlines. Now, this can probably tie back to number 1, where we're talking about inconsistent reporting. If you have grants that are requiring you to invoice or requiring you to provide, monthly, quarterly, whatever reports, you need to be aware of that. And that needs to be on your calendar. It needs to be a cadence that is a part of your process, so that you can do that on time. When you don't, which I'm sure if this is happening to you, you hold up funding, cause the funder or the grantor to start to lose confidence in you. It starts to bring up questions, and they're wondering what's going on internally and in-house. And I think the important thing to remember here is, and I'm only saying this as someone who works in an outsourced accounting capacity, is that it's not on your bookkeeper or your accounting team to make sure that you're reporting on time. It's a collaborative effort, I should say. They should be working with you, which means that there is a part that you have to play. So if you're not sharing information timely, if you're not if you're not responding to their questions timely, which makes it, them closing the books to be delayed, like, it is collaborative. And I, in a moment of transparency, will share that it is frustrating for us who work on the outsourced side to sometimes be held up, because we understand, that you might be short-staffed, things are happening, but we also pride ourselves on working well. And so a lot of times when we're not on time because we're not getting information timely, it's very difficult. And then I'm not gonna lie, I feel bad. Like, I want to make sure that you're getting what you need, you're getting what you paid for, you're getting what you promised. That requires something on your part. You play a part in this too, right? And so it's a collaborative situation. It's a partnership, a relationship. So make sure that you are doing your part and making sure that grant reporting deadlines are met. Now, the last red flag, which kind of almost sums up a lot of the other ones, is overly complex processes. And so if we have to jump through hoops, and I say we, but it's not even just accounting. It could be even your program directors, like your assistant who is like supporting you in certain areas. If you have to jump through hoops to get the information that you need, something is going on. If it's like this, just to get an expense submitted or an invoice submitted and paid, something's going on. And so, I implore you that as you think about all of the key areas of your organization, what makes it run, like, how are your processes? How are your systems, right? I've talked about, the 3-prong approach of people, processes, and tech, right? And so typically you're going to be looking at a mixture of those 3 things. And depending on whatever area it is, you'll probably be one area may be more tech than it is people. One area may be like deeply, processed, right? And supported by tech. Not so much people. However, you need to make sure that whatever it is, it's working well. It needs to be streamlined and it needs to be operating like a well-oiled machine. And if it's not, and there's a lot of hiccups, find out what those hiccups are so you can close that gap. When processes are overly complex, that's when we find that things end up being delayed. That's when we find that it's harder to get the information that you need. It's harder to report. So you want to make sure that for key areas, because you want to start with key areas, right? Because we know we want the organization to run like a well-oiled machine, but we're also realistic, right? And so, things take time. So you start with the key areas. And honestly, one of those needs to be fiscal, because that's how you get your money. That's how you get paid. That's where the money is being managed. So you need to start there, right? But you start in those key areas and you get that thing set. You need to bring everybody to the table that's touching that process. It's not enough just for the heads. The people that are touching the process need to be a part of the conversation, because they can give you raw and unfiltered information about what's working and what's not. And that helps to inform your decision. So if you're using, let's say, an outdated accounting system, you need to know the people who's using the accounting system. They need to tell you why this feels outdated, why it's not working, why I got to export and do 1,000,001 things before I can give you a report. If you don't know that information, when you're sourcing a new accounting system, you're not gonna keep those things at the forefront, and then you could potentially invest in something that still won't work. And so you want to make sure that you have the right people at the table. So those are the 7 red flags. I'm going to run through them high level once again. So that's inconsistent financial reporting, unreconciled bank accounts, over-reliance on any one source of funding, inadequate reserves, high turnover in key roles, failing to meet grant reporting deadlines, and overly complex processes. And so I hope that this video helped you. If you have any questions about things that you can do to combat some of these red flags, please drop them in the comments. And if not, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.